The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive sphere of crystal and metal that could hold millions of creatures from 1,000 different worlds. Today, every seat was filled. Today, the galaxy was dying. Park sat in the small section reserved for humanity. Her seat was in the back corner, far from the center where the important species gathered. She wore a simple black suit, her dark hair pulled back neatly. Her face showed no emotion as she watched the chaos unfold before her. They had come without warning. Their ships appeared from the darkness between galaxies, black vessels that moved like shadows through space. In 3 months, they had conquered 12 star systems. Billions of beings were dead or enslaved. The ancient empires that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years were crumbling like sand castles before a wave. "We must retreat to the core systems," shouted Ambassador of the Collective. His blue skin was pale with fear, and his 4 arms waved wildly as he spoke. "If we concentrate our forces, we can hold them back." "Retreat," the voice belonged to High Speaker of the Dominion. He was a massive creature, nearly 4 meters tall, with scales that shone like polished bronze. "Do not retreat. We will fight them in open battle." "Your fleet was destroyed at the Battle of," said a quiet voice. It belonged to Elder of the oldest species in the galaxy. She appeared as a floating sphere of soft light, her true form hidden within. "You have 17 ships remaining. They have 17,000. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the numbers, but hearing them spoken aloud made the truth impossible to ignore. Watched as the great powers argued, the wanted to hide, the wanted to fight and die with honor, the spoke of ancient prophecies that no one understood, the suggested surrendering and hopping for mercy. No one agreed on anything. Beside sat. He was young, barely 30 years old, but his mind was sharper than any computer. He served as her assistant and advisor, though suspected he was also there to watch her for Earth's government. He held a small datapad in his hands, his fingers moving across its surface as he gathered information. "They have been arguing for 6 hours, said quietly. "They will argue for 6 more, maybe 6 days. By then another system will fall." Nodded but said nothing. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Assembly for only 2 years. In that time she had learned many things. She had learned that the ancient races looked down on humanity. To them, humans were children, a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel a century ago. They were allowed a seat in the assembly as a courtesy, nothing more. She had also learned that these ancient races, for all their wisdom and technology, had forgotten how to fight. They had not fought a war in 3,000 years. They had grown fat and lazy, their warrior traditions becoming ceremonies and parades. They believed that violence was beneath them. They had always paid others to do their fighting. When they came, none of them knew what to do. "Ambassador Park," a voice echoed through the chamber. It was Grand Mediator Solus, the being who led the assembly. He appeared as a tall, thin figure wrapped in flowing robes, his face hidden behind a golden mask. "The assembly recognizes the representative of Earth. You have requested time to speak." The chamber fell quiet. Millions of eyes turned to look at the small human woman in the corner. Some of those eyes showed curiosity. Most showed contempt or pity. What could the primitives possibly have to say? Stood slowly. Her heart was beating fast, but her face remained calm. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. She had waited for the right moment, and now it had come. "Thank you, Grand Mediator," she said. Her voice was carried by the translation systems to every being in the chamber. "I have listened to this debate for many hours. I have heard many plans proposed. I have heard much fear." "The human speaks of fear," laughed Ambassador. "What does a primitive species know of our situation? You have one small planet. We have empires spanning thousands of stars. When they come for you, you will die in a single day." Looked at the ambassador. She did not smile, but something changed in her eyes. It was a look that made suddenly uncomfortable, though he could not say why. "You are correct," said. "We are a small species. We have one planet, one star system, a handful of colonies. We have been part of this assembly for less than a century. You have looked down on us since the day we arrived." She paused and looked around the chamber. Every being was watching her now. "But I must ask you something," she continued. "In all your thousands of years, in all your great empires, how many wars have you fought? How many battles have you won?" No one answered. "I can tell you how many wars humans have fought," said. "We have records going back 10,000 years. In that time, we have fought over 4,000 wars. We have had periods of peace that lasted only a few decades before the fighting began again." She took a step forward, her voice growing stronger. "You see this as a weakness. You think we are violent primitives who cannot control ourselves. But I tell you now, this is our strength. We have been preparing for war since before your species learned to walk. We have studied every form of combat, every strategy, every weapon. We have killed each other by the billions, and each time we have learned." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the Grand Mediator leaned forward to listen. "They are strong," said, "but they have never met a species like humanity. They have never faced a people who were born for war." Stood and moved to her side, his datapad ready. The two humans stood together, small and fragile-looking compared to the massive aliens around them. But there was something in their eyes that made the ancient races suddenly nervous. "What are you saying?" asked Elder, her light flickering with uncertainty. Park took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. This was the moment that humanity had been waiting for. "I am saying," she said clearly, "that Earth has received reports of the invasion. I am saying that my government has made a decision, and I am here to deliver a message to this assembly and to the Empire." She looked around the chamber one final time, meeting the eyes of every species, every ambassador, every leader. "Humanity is entering this fight." The words hung in the air like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then the laughter began. The laughter filled the great chamber like a storm. It came from every direction, from species of every shape and size. They made wet clicking sounds that passed for humor among their kind. They roared and slapped their massive tails against the ground. Even they seemed to pulse with amusement, their lights flickering rapidly. Stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. Beside her kept his eyes on his datapad, recording everything. They had expected this reaction. They had planned for it. "The human wants to fight," bellowed High Speaker, his bronze scales shaking with laughter. 100 years of space travel, and they think they can stand against the... My people have been warriors for 50,000 years, and even we cannot defeat them." "Perhaps they will throw rocks at the invasion fleet," said Ambassador, wiping tears from his large eyes. "Or maybe they will ask the very nicely to go away." More laughter followed, waited. Elder was the first to stop laughing. The ancient being floated closer, her light becoming more focused as she examined the two humans. "Child," she said, her voice gentle but condescending, "we appreciate your courage. Truly, we do. But you must understand your situation. Earth has a population of 12 billion. Your military consists of perhaps 100,000 soldiers and a few hundred small ships. They have trillions of warriors and fleets that can darken the stars." "Your concern is noted," said calmly. "This is not concern," continued. "This is mathematics. You cannot fight the any more than an insect can fight a star. You will be destroyed, and your destruction will accomplish nothing." Looked at the ancient being. "May I ask you a question, Elder?" Light flickered with surprise. Few beings dared to question a, "You may ask." "How long have you been watching humanity?" The question seemed to confuse the Elder. "We have observed your species since you first developed radio signals, approximately 200 of your years ago. We have watched your development with some interest. And in that time, said, what did you see? Considered the question. We saw a violent species. You fought constantly among yourselves. Your history is filled with blood and suffering. You developed weapons of terrible power and came very close to destroying yourselves on several occasions. Yes, agreed. What else? You eventually learned to work together, at least enough to reach the stars. You built your first faster-than-light ship 97 years ago. Since then, you have established 12 colonies and built a small fleet of trading and exploration vessels. That is what you saw, said, but what did you miss? The chamber grew quieter. Even those who had been laughing began to pay attention. There was something in the human's voice, a confidence that seemed out of place for such a small and weak species. We missed nothing, said firmly, the see-all. Stepped forward, raising his datapad. Permission to display evidence. Grand Mediator Solus nodded slowly. Permission granted. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth, the small blue planet that humans called home. Around it floated the orbital stations that the galaxy knew about, the simple structures where humans built their trading ships and received alien visitors. This is what you have seen, said. This is what we allowed you to see. The image changed. The orbital stations remained, but now other structures appeared around them. Hidden behind moons, buried inside asteroids, floating in the darkness far from any sunlight. They were shipyards, but not like any shipyards the aliens had seen before. They were enormous, each one capable of building hundreds of vessels at once. The laughter stopped completely. 60 years ago, continued, humanity realized something important. We realized that the galaxy was not safe. We saw how the ancient races looked at us, how they dismissed us as primitives. We saw that if a threat ever came, no one would protect us. The hologram showed ships emerging from the hidden shipyards. They were not trading vessels. They were warships, sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose only. We began building in secret, said. We hid our true military production behind civilian projects. When your observers saw us building a trading station, we were actually building 3 warships behind it. When you saw us mining asteroids for resources, we were actually gathering materials for weapons. High Speaker leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. How many ships? Smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. 12,000 capital ships, 40,000 support vessels, 200,000 fighters and bombers, all built in secret over 60 years, all hidden from your observers, all crewed by trained soldiers. The silence in the chamber was absolute. That is impossible, whispered Ambassador. We would have detected such construction. We would have seen the resource movements, the energy signatures. You saw what you expected to see, said. You expected to see a primitive species struggling to survive. You expected to see simple trading ships and small colonies. So that is what we showed you. She stepped forward, and somehow she seemed larger than before. Her voice carried easily through the massive chamber. You have studied us for 200 years, but you never understood us. You saw our violence and called us primitive. You saw our wars and called us self-destructive, but you never asked the most important question. What question? Elder asked. Her light was dim now, uncertain. You never asked what we learned from those wars, said. You never wondered what 10,000 years of constant conflict taught us about fighting. You looked at our history and saw chaos. We looked at our history and saw lessons. Change the holographic display again. Now it showed battle formations, strategic diagrams, tactical analyses. Page after page of information scrolled past, far too fast to read. We have studied every war in our history, he said. We have analyzed every battle, every strategy, every mistake. We have learned from our victories and our defeats, and for the past 60 years we have also studied you. Studied us? High Speaker asked. Every conflict in the galaxy for the past century, confirmed. We have recordings of your battles, analyses of your tactics, profiles of your commanders. We know how to fight. We know how to defend. We know the weaknesses of every species in this chamber, including the asked quietly. Smiled for the first time. It was a cold smile, the smile of a predator. We have been studying this since they first appeared. We have analyzed their attack patterns, their fleet compositions, their command structures. We know how they think, we know how they fight, and we know how to beat them. Grand Mediator Solus rose from his seat. His golden mask seemed to shine brighter than before. You claim to have hidden a massive military force from the entire galaxy, he said. You claim to have strategies that can defeat an enemy that has crushed a dozen species. These are extraordinary claims. Yes, agreed, they are. Can you prove them? Looked at, he nodded and pressed a button on his datapad. Far away in the Sol system, something began to move. The hidden shipyards opened their doors. The secret bases powered up their engines. The enormous fleet that humanity had spent 60 years building began to emerge from the darkness. In the Galactic Assembly, every communication device suddenly activated. Thousands of messages arrived at once, each one carrying the same images. Ships. Thousands and thousands of ships moving into formation around Earth. The proof, said quietly, is already on its way. The chamber erupted into chaos, but this time no one was laughing. The chaos lasted for nearly an hour. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Military advisors rushed in and out of the chamber, carrying reports and demanding explanations. Communication officers worked desperately to verify what their sensors were showing them, and remained standing in their small section, calm and patient. They had expected this reaction too. They had planned for everything. Finally, Grand Mediator Solus restored order. His voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of his authority. Silence, the assembly will have order. Slowly, the noise died down. Every being returned to their seat, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where before there had been contempt and pity for the humans, now there was something else. It was not quite respect, not yet, but it was close to fear. High Speaker was the first to speak. The massive warrior looked at the holographic images still floating in the center of the chamber, showing the human fleet in all its terrible glory. Our sensors have confirmed the human claims, he said slowly. There are approximately 12,000 capital-class vessels currently assembling near their home world. Their design is unfamiliar, but our military analysts believe they are heavily armed. How is this possible? Ambassador asked. His voice was shaking. How did they hide this from us for 60 years? We have the most advanced detection systems in the galaxy. Your detection systems are designed to find threats, said. We were not a threat. We were a small, primitive species that posed no danger to anyone. Your observers looked for what they expected to find, and they found it. They never thought to look deeper. Elder drifted closer to the human delegation. Her light was steady now, focused with intense concentration. I must ask you something, Ambassador Park, she said. This fleet you have built, these weapons you have hidden. Why? You say you did this because you feared the galaxy was not safe, but the galaxy has been at peace for thousands of years. What made you so certain that war was coming? Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Do you know what my grandmother used to tell me, Elder? She grew up during a time of great conflict on Earth. She watched her city burn. She lost her family, her home, everything she had. And she told me something I have never forgotten. The chamber was silent, waiting. She said, peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is a brief rest between storms. Enjoy it while it lasts, but never forget how to fight, because the storm always comes back. Looked around the chamber at the ancient races who had ruled the galaxy for so long. You forgot, she said simply. You had peace for so long that you forgot what war really means. You forgot that the universe is dangerous, that there are things out there that want to take what you have. You forgot how to fight. And you did not forget, said. We could not forget, replied. Our history would not let us. Every generation of humans grew up learning about war. We studied it, analyzed it, prepared for it. Even during our longest periods of peace, we kept our weapons ready. We kept training our soldiers. We kept building our defenses. Stepped forward, changing the holographic display once more. Now it showed detailed technical specifications for the human warships. Our vessels are designed based on everything we have learned from 10,000 years of warfare, he explained. They are fast, heavily armored, and carry weapons that can punch through any known defense system. Our fighters are piloted by humans who have trained in combat simulations since childhood. Our commanders have studied every battle in galactic history. But you have never actually fought a space battle, High Speaker pointed out. Training and study are not the same as real combat. They have been conquering worlds for months. They have experience. You are correct, admitted. We have not fought in space, but we have fought everywhere else. We have fought in deserts and jungles, in mountains and oceans, in the air and underground. We have fought with stones and with nuclear weapons. We have fought in ways you cannot imagine. She paused, her eyes meeting the warrior's gaze. They have experience in easy victories. They have crushed species that forgot how to resist. They have never faced an enemy that truly knows how to fight. They have never faced humans. Grand Mediator Solus raised his hand, calling for attention. Ambassador Park, he said, let us assume everything you say is true. Let us assume your hidden fleet is as powerful as you claim and your people are as skilled at warfare as you believe. The question remains, why? Why would humanity involve itself in a war that does not threaten you directly? They are far from Earth. You could stay hidden, stay safe, while the rest of the galaxy falls. This was the question had been waiting for. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. You ask why we would fight, she said. The answer is simple. We fight because it is the right thing to do. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The concept seemed strange to many of the aliens. They were used to thinking in terms of profit and loss, of advantages and disadvantages. The idea of fighting simply because it was right was foreign to them. There is more, continued. We fight because we know what they will do if they win. They will not stop with the ancient empires. Eventually they will come for Earth. They will come for humanity, and by then there will be no one left to stand with us. She raised her voice, speaking not just to the assembly, but to every being watching across the galaxy. Today they are your enemy. Tomorrow they will be ours. If we wait until tomorrow, we will fight alone. But if we fight today, we fight together, and together we can win. High Speaker stood slowly. The Massive looked at the human woman for a long moment. They have not knelt before another species in 50,000 years, he said. But I am beginning to think that perhaps we should learn from you. Ambassador made a strange sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. They always believed that the younger species could teach the elders nothing. I see now that we were wrong. One by one, the ambassadors of the ancient races began to stand. It was not a formal gesture, not part of any protocol. It was simply an acknowledgement. The small, primitive species from the corner of the galaxy had become something more. Elder's light grew brighter, warmer than it had been throughout the entire meeting. Ambassador Park, she said, on behalf of I extend our gratitude. You have reminded us of something we forgot long ago. You have reminded us that courage and strength are not measured in years or technology, but in the heart of those who refuse to surrender. Bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Elder, but gratitude will not win this war. We need action. What do you propose? Grand Mediator Solus asked. Looked at, he nodded, and began displaying a series of tactical maps. They are currently advancing toward the core worlds, explained. They expect to face a weakened defense and achieve an easy victory. We propose to give them something very different. The map showed the fleet moving through space, a dark cloud of ships that seemed to swallow the stars. And moving to meet them from a direction the enemy would never expect was the human fleet. "We will hit them here," said, pointing to a specific point in space. "At the nebula, our ships will emerge from faster-than-light travel directly on their flank. While they are responding to our attack, the remaining forces will strike from the other side. We will catch them between two enemies." "That is a bold strategy," High Speaker said, "but they have thousands more ships than we do." "Numbers are not everything," said. "They are used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force. They are not used to enemies who fight smart. We will not try to match them ship for ship. We will hit them fast, hard, and where they least expect it. We will make them fear us." Grand Mediator Solus looked around the chamber. For the first time in months, he saw something other than despair in the eyes of the assembled races. "Does the Assembly approve of this alliance with humanity?" he asked. The vote was unanimous. "Then let it be recorded," Solus declared. "On this day, humanity formally enters the Galactic War. May the stars watch over us all." Allowed herself a small smile. The hard part was over. Now came the harder part. Now came the fighting. The nebula was a beautiful place to die. Clouds of glowing gas stretched across millions of kilometers, painting space in shades of purple and gold. Stars were being born inside those clouds, new suns that would burn for billions of years. But today, the nebula would witness destruction instead of creation. Admiral stood on the bridge of the battleship Eternal Dawn, watching the final preparations for battle. She was a small woman, barely over 1.5 meters tall, but her crew treated her with absolute respect. She had earned that respect through years of training, years of study, and a mind that could see patterns in chaos that others missed. "Fleet status report," she said calmly. "All ships in position, Admiral," reported her second-in-command, a young officer named Park. 8,000 capital ships ready for immediate combat. The remaining 4,000 are in reserve position behind the nebula. Nodded. The plan was simple in concept but difficult in execution. The human fleet would attack them from an unexpected angle, drawing their attention and forcing them to respond. While the enemy was focused on the humans, the survivors would strike from behind. It was a classic pincer movement, a strategy that humans had used for thousands of years. But no plan survived contact with the enemy, knew that better than anyone. "What do we know about tactics?" she asked. Pulled up a holographic display. Based on their previous battles, they prefer overwhelming force. They arrange their ships in dense formations and simply crush anything in their path. Their weapons are powerful but relatively slow to recharge. Their ships are heavily armored but not particularly fast. Weaknesses. Their command structure is rigid. All orders come from the central flagship. If that ship is destroyed or damaged, their coordination suffers significantly. Also, they seem to have difficulty adapting to unexpected situations. Every battle they have won has followed the same pattern. Smiled slightly. "Then we will give them a different pattern." Far behind the human fleet, watching through a secure communication channel, Park and observed the preparations. They were aboard a diplomatic vessel, safely away from the combat zone. Had wanted to be with the fleet, but Earth's government had forbidden it. She was too valuable to risk in battle. "How long until contact?" asked. "Approximately 2 hours," replied. "They are approaching the nebula now. They seem to have no idea we are here." "Good, let us hope their surprise is complete." On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, addressed her crew. "In a few hours we will fight the enemy that has brought this galaxy to its knees. Many of you are afraid. That is natural. Fear is what keeps us alive. But remember what we fight for. Remember why we are here." She paused, looking at the faces around her. They were young faces, most of them. Young humans who had never experienced real combat. but they had trained for this moment their entire lives. The galaxy thinks we are primitives, continued. They think we are children playing at war. Today, we show them the truth. Today, we remind the universe why humanity survived while other species failed. We survived because we never stopped fighting. We survived because we never gave up. And we will survive this. A cheer rose from the crew. It was not loud, not wild. It was controlled, disciplined, focused. These were soldiers and they were ready. The hours passed slowly. The human fleet waited in the shadow of the nebula, invisible to enemy sensors. The fleet approached, thousands of black ships moving through space like a swarm of insects. They were heading for the home world, expecting another easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Enemy fleet entering optimal attack range, reported. Recommend commencing operation. Took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything humanity had built, everything they had planned for came down to this. All ships, she said, her voice carrying to every vessel in the fleet, commence attack. The human fleet erupted from the nebula like fire from a volcano. 8,000 ships accelerating at speeds they had never seen, weapons charging, formations spreading out to maximize their firepower. The lead ships opened fire first, their advanced weapons tearing through the darkness toward the enemy. The first ship to be hit simply ceased to exist. The human weapons, designed based on 10,000 years of warfare, cut through its armor like paper. A second ship followed, then a third, then dozens more. In the first minute of combat, over 100 vessels were destroyed. Confusion spread through the fleet. Their sensors showed enemies appearing from nowhere. Their communications filled with reports of damage, of ships lost, of weapons that hit harder than anything they had ever faced. On the command ship, Supreme Commander Al watched in disbelief as his perfect formation began to crumble. This was impossible. These were humans, the primitive species that could barely build a proper starship. How could they possibly cause such damage? Return fire, Al ordered. All ships return fire immediately. The fleet began to respond, their massive weapons turning toward the human attackers. Beams of dark energy lanced across space, seeking targets. Some found their marks, and human ships began to take damage. But Admiral had planned for this. Execute maneuver pattern Delta, she commanded. The human fleet split apart, ships scattering in what appeared to be chaos. But it was not chaos. It was a carefully planned dance, each ship knowing exactly where to go, exactly when to fire, exactly how to avoid enemy weapons. They were not prepared for enemies that moved this way. Their weapons were designed to hit large, slow targets. The human ships were fast, unpredictable, constantly changing direction. More shots missed than hit. Meanwhile, the human weapons kept finding their targets. Incoming message from the fleet, reported. They are beginning their attack. From the opposite direction, the surviving warships emerged. There were only a few hundred of them, but they hit the rear with everything they had. The enemy fleet was now trapped between two forces, unable to focus on either one. Supreme Commander Al felt something he had never experienced before in battle. He felt fear. "This is not possible," he whispered. "These are primitives, these are children." But the children were winning. On the diplomatic vessel, watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. Ships were dying, both human and. Explosions flared across the nebula like terrible flowers blooming in the darkness. She felt each human death like a knife in her heart. But she also felt hope. The plan was working. Enemy fleet losing cohesion, reported, his voice tight with tension. Their formation is breaking apart. Casualties estimated at 30% and rising. And our losses? Was quiet for a moment. Approximately 1,200 ships destroyed, another 300 heavily damaged. Closed her eyes. Over 100,000 human lives gone in less than an hour. It was the price of war, the price she had asked her people to pay. She would carry those deaths with her forever. But she had also saved billions more. "The command ship," she said, "is it within range?" Checked his data. Admiral is moving to engage now. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn stared at her target. The command vessel was enormous, nearly 10 times the size of any human ship. It bristled with weapons, surrounded by guard ships, protected by layers of shielding. It was the heart of the enemy fleet. If it fell, the battle would be won. "All reserve forces," commanded, "focus fire on the command ship. Everything we have." 4,000 fresh human vessels emerged from behind the nebula, adding their firepower to the assault. The space around the command ship became a storm of energy, weapons from every direction striking its defenses. The shields began to fail. Supreme Commander Al watched as his command ship shook under the assault. Warning alarms filled the air. Damage reports flooded in from every section. His guard ships were being torn apart around him. "Retreat," he screamed. "All ships retreat." But it was too late. The human weapons finally broke through the command ship's armor. Admiral watched as the massive vessel began to break apart, explosions ripping through its structure. The heart of the fleet had stopped beating. Throughout the battle zone, the surviving ships began to flee. Without their commander, without their coordination, they scattered like frightened animals. The humans pursued, destroying as many as they could, but most escaped into the darkness of space. The Battle of Nebula was over. Humanity had won its first victory. And the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Nebula. In that time, everything had changed. The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had given up hope suddenly found reason to believe again. Worlds that had been preparing to surrender began to resist. The who had seemed unstoppable were suddenly facing enemies everywhere they turned. And at the center of it all were the humans. Commander Lee stood on the surface of Prime, watching as his troops secured the last enemy position. The planet had been under control for 3 months, its people enslaved and brutalized. Now it was free. "Area secure, Commander," reported one of his soldiers. "All enemy forces eliminated or captured." Nodded. He was tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He had been fighting almost continuously since the war began. His small unit of human ground forces had become legendary throughout the galaxy, liberating world after world from occupation. "Get the civilians to the medical stations," he ordered, "and find me a communication link. I need to report to Admiral." The war had changed humanity. Before the Battle of Nebula, they had been hidden, secretive, preparing for a conflict they hoped would never come. Now they were everywhere. Human ships patrolled trade routes that had been too dangerous to travel. Human soldiers fought on the ground and forces provided support from orbit. Human commanders led combined fleets made up of a dozen different species. The primitives had become the leaders. In the Galactic Assembly, Park had become one of the most powerful voices in the chamber. The ancient races that had once laughed at her now listened carefully to every word she spoke. Earth's seat was no longer in the back corner. It was in the front row, right next to the Grand Mediator himself. "They have retreated from Sector 7, reported to the Assembly. "Commander Lee's forces liberated the final planet this morning. Estimated civilian casualties are high, but the surviving population is being evacuated to safe zones." "How many planets does that make?" Elder asked. They had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, providing resources and intelligence to the war effort. 47, replied. 47 worlds freed from control in 6 months. High Speaker made a sound that might have been a laugh. 6 months ago, my people had 17 ships. Now we have nearly 1,000 thanks to human shipyards. 6 months ago, I thought they would die with honor in a losing battle. Now I think we might actually win this war. "We will win," said firmly. But we must not become overconfident. They have lost much, but they still have massive forces in their home territory. They will not give up easily. She was right. The Empire had ruled its corner of the galaxy for thousands of years. They had conquered hundreds of species, absorbed countless civilizations. The defeats they had suffered against humanity were painful, but they were far from destroyed. Admiral knew this better than anyone. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Unconquered Spirit, studying the tactical displays that covered the walls. The ship was twice the size of the Eternal Dawn, built in human shipyards that now worked around the clock producing vessels for the war. Intelligence reports confirm large fleet movements, reported her aide, now a full commander himself, had proven himself in battle after battle, rising quickly through the ranks. They are gathering their remaining forces near the border of their home space. How many ships? Asked. Estimated at 30,000, maybe more. 30,000 ships. Even with all their victories, the combined Allied fleet numbered less than 20,000. They were preparing for one final massive assault, a desperate attempt to crush the resistance before it could grow any stronger. They are going to attack the home world again, said quietly. They think if they can destroy the heart of the resistance, the alliance will fall apart. Can we stop them? Was quiet for a long moment. The mathematics were not in their favor. Even with human tactics, even with their advanced weapons, 30,000 ships against 20,000 was a difficult battle to win. But mathematics had not determined the outcome of the last battle, and it would not determine this one either. Send a message to all fleet commanders, ordered. We gather at the home world in 3 days. Every ship, every fighter, every soldier we have. The final battle was coming. 3 days later, the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen assembled in orbit around the home world. Human ships flew alongside warriors. Vessels provided support while craft offered coordination and intelligence. Even species that had remained neutral throughout the war had sent ships, finally choosing to fight rather than wait to be conquered. Park stood on the bridge of the Unconquered Spirit beside Admiral. She had insisted on being present for this battle, and this time no one had argued with her. They are coming, reported from his station. Fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel, 32,000 ships confirmed. Looked at the display showing the enemy force. It was terrifying, a wall of darkness that seemed to swallow the stars. This was the full might of the Empire, everything they had left, coming to crush the rebellion once and for all. All ships, said calmly, prepare for battle. The fighting began with a wave of fire that lit up the entire system. Thousands of weapons discharged at once, filling space with deadly energy. Ships on both sides began to die immediately, their hulls torn apart by the terrible forces being unleashed. But this time it was different. This time the Allied forces knew what they were facing. This time they had trained together, fought together, learned to trust each other. The combined fleet moved like a single organism, each part supporting the others, each ship knowing its role. They tried their usual tactics, concentrating their forces and attempting to crush individual enemy formations. But the humans had anticipated this. Each time they concentrated, the Allies would scatter and reform, hitting the enemy from unexpected angles. Commander Lee led a team of human soldiers who boarded enemy ships and destroyed them from the inside. His small force caused damage far beyond their numbers, sowing chaos throughout the fleet. The battle lasted for 18 hours. 18 hours of continuous fighting, of ships dying, of heroes rising and falling. It was the longest and bloodiest engagement in galactic history. And in the end, humanity won. The fleet broke. What remained of their ships fled back to their home space, pursued by Allied forces who showed no mercy. The war was not over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Empire would never recover from this defeat. On the bridge of the unconquered spirit, Admiral slumped in her chair, exhausted beyond words. Around her, the crew was cheering, crying, embracing each other. They had done the impossible. They had saved the galaxy. Park stood beside her, her own eyes wet with tears. So many had died. So many would never see this victory. But those deaths had not been in vain. "What happens now?" asked quietly. Looked out at the stars. The same stars that humanity had looked at for thousands of years, wondering if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew. They were not alone, and they had proven that they belonged among the stars. "Now," said, "we rebuild. We help the galaxy heal from this war, and we make sure nothing like the ever threatens us again." In the Galactic Assembly, Grand Mediator Solus addressed the gathered species. His voice was filled with emotion as he spoke. "When the first came, we were afraid. We were divided. We had forgotten how to fight, how to stand together against evil. And then humanity came forward. A small species, a young species, one that we had dismissed as primitives. They showed us what courage truly means. They reminded us that strength is not measured in years or technology, but in the willingness to stand up for what is right." He turned toward the human delegation, toward Park and the representatives of a species that had changed the galaxy forever. "The universe is safer today because of humanity. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid, but we can honor that debt by learning from them, by remembering the lessons they have taught us. Peace must be protected. Freedom must be defended. And when darkness threatens, we must stand together and fight." The chamber erupted in applause. Every species, every race, every being joined in the celebration of victory. Stood and accepted the honor with grace. But in her heart, she was thinking of her grandmother, of the old woman who had taught her that peace was just a rest between storms. "We survived the storm," whispered to herself, "and we will survive the next one too." Because that was what humans did. They survived, they fought, and they never ever gave up. The galaxy had learned that lesson now, and they would never forget it. The end.